Okay, it's time to get started. This is the 86th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And we've been here every Tuesday and Thursday, more or less every Tuesday and Thursday at this time, sometimes we vary it a bit, in order to debate a topic of critical importance to the security sector. And the idea of thought leadership is not to try and solve all the problems, it's to stimulate thinking, get ideas. What are the issues? How can they be tackled? What are the barriers? And the thinking behind this is the more that we critique and the better that we critique today, the better type of security we get tomorrow. And the subject matter today is one that has emerged from previous webinars and I know is dear to the heart of many of you. And that is about managing the mental health of frontline workers. How well is the security sector doing? And today we're very much thinking about frontline workers. And I've got an expert panel, 4 people, many of you who will know them from different parts of the world, who are coming at this from different angles. So as is the usual case, I'm going to in a second invite all 4 to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I'll invite each of them to make an opening statement. That is their 3 minutes to say what they think about this subject matter. Now, once they've done that, we'll come to you, the audience, and invite you to ask questions. For doing that, please can you use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Get your questions in early and we'll endeavour to get to you as soon as we can. Without further ado, let's go and meet our expert panel. And let's first of all go to Chris. Chris, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody from the United Kingdom. Thank you for having me back, Martin. I'm Chris Middleton. I'm the Security Director for ABM UK. I'm celebrating my 18th year in security and management in operations in the FM sector. And previous to that, I spent 2 years working in psychiatric care in the care sector. I'm also a member of the Security Institute, ACES International, and also an advisory board member of the IFPO UK. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Makes you very well qualified. Nicholas, please introduce yourself.
Hello, and I'm very happy to be here. I've been in the security industry, well, just going into my 21st year, last 8.5 in the healthcare sector. I sit as a director for the National Association for Healthcare Security and also on the advisory board for IFPO UK.
Thank you very much indeed. Nicholas. Barry.
Good afternoon, everyone. I work for Wilson James. I'm the managing director. I've actually been in the security industry longer than I can believe, 32 years, having spent only with 4 companies, undertaken probably every operational frontline manager's job, been an operations director, a sales manager for 3 years, and in my last 2 companies I was also the managing director and now obviously managing director at Wilson James.
Barry, thank you very much indeed. And finally to Harmeet, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Harmeet from Mumbai, and I'm a professionally certified coach from International Coaching Federation. Been coaching for the last 9.5, 10 years now. And I work with a lot of senior leaders across various sectors to support them in an ontological way of looking at things, which involves not just their thinking process, but also their body and emotions.
Thank you very much indeed, Harmeet. Well, you can see why we've chosen the people we have for the panel. So without further ado, let's ask each of them to make their opening statement. 3 minutes when we hear their view on this topic. Chris, your opening statement, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Martin. So I'd like to answer this in 2 parts, if I may. To what extent are we aware of mental health issues of the frontline security staff? I think it's fair to say that it's not something new. It's something we've been fully aware of for a number of years, and what's happened with COVID-19 has exacerbated what was already an underlying concern for us as an industry, and especially for us as leaders and businesses. I don't think it comes as a surprise to learn that, you know, our colleagues are suffering, and given the complexities of the uncertainty of jobs and our frontline workers and the challenges of what they're up against on a daily basis, leaving home, not sure whether they're returning home because the families are saying you've got to go on transport and, you know, there may be COVID and the fear that comes with that. And this has all really presented itself and manifested itself in a way that our teams are now having to think additionally to the common threats of terrorism and other types of things. So my personal view is it's another pandemic within itself if it's not treated. And I think as an industry leaders that we need to be looking more about self-care in terms of what's the resolution. We're a solutions-based industry. We always have been. Clients look to us at times of when things are going wrong. Security has always been at the forefront, but we need to, as an industry, start to make change for the positive and move away from employee assistance programs being the be all and end all. And to Harmeet's point, it's more about self-care and coaching and giving the frontline workers the tools to do the job, to recognise the self-care elements and the coaching that goes with that for their mental health. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate your opening statement. Can I remind, please, the audience, question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. You get your questions and answers on as soon as you can, and we'll try and come to you in the debate afterwards. Nicholas, your opening statement, please.
I started by considering how I entered the security industry, which, like many of my peers, was entirely by accident. It wasn't a planned or chosen career. It's been an incredibly rewarding career, and I've worked across all sorts of sectors and picked out some common themes that universally, security are the backbone and the foundation of stability for organisations. Often they're unable to show any vulnerability, yet despite being undervalued, they're expected to put themselves in a secondary position to the security and safety of the organisation. This often exposes them to what I would describe as harrowing events. And despite this and the contradictions in the value placed on security, they're often left very minimally supported. Quite often there are employee assistance programs and debriefings for other members of staff, but security are expected to return back to business as normal, nigh on straight away. The cost of this, I have unfortunately lost a colleague to a suicide, and I also was lucky enough to intervene with another colleague, but to be frank, I felt woefully unprepared for doing that, and I would put the success of that intervention as much down to chance and just being human as anything that I planned. That spurred my personal interest, and I've looked at suicide intervention, TRIM, and also trained externally as a counsellor. No intention of practicing, but I want to be able to help and support my colleagues. I'm passionate about this because I have suffered an episode of PTSD myself. I don't really want to go into the details of the why and the wherefore around that, but I have realised, much like Chris just said, that early intervention, self-care, and equally noticing something is wrong with a colleague and intervening at an early stage can lead to a far better, far quicker outcome. The silver line, well, the negative of COVID has been the increased pressure it's put on everyone. Security officers exposed to the same financial and family pressures, and also new and evolving confrontations and threats at work. The silver lining is it has brought the acceptability in the conversation around mental health and well-being to the forefront, with organisations like IFPO leading on the well-being of security officers and making resources available. So my hope is that this new conversation gains traction and is sustainable into the future, which is very much what I hope to get from this webinar and going forward.
Nicholas, thank you very much indeed. Interesting points. We'll sure come back to you on many of those, I hope, as we go through. Okay, Barry, your opening statement, please.
Okay, thanks. I just want to talk to you really about some of the things that we've been doing in Wilson James, not to preach or to tell anybody how to do it, but I have a saying within the business, steal with pride. So if you want to steal some of our actions that we've done, I'm quite happy to share them. This is very dear to my heart. What we say in Wilson James is the heart of our business, it's people, because that is our product. And what we've felt over the last 10 months, well-being and mental health has always been there. But with COVID, it's brought it to the forefront. I was really pleased that the government, in some of their presentations, announced the security guards, they called them security guards, security officers, should be recognised. And our officers, like many other frontline workers, they've been going on public transport, they've been going to site, and some of them feel isolated because they like the interaction, and they may have been working on a really busy location, and then they find themselves that they're the only person there. And that's probably sometimes not just at work, but they also go home to an empty house. And that can be quite difficult as well. So it's not just because of COVID, it's always been there, but it's been brought to the forefront. So what we've done is that we've taken a number of people through some training modules, and now we've got over 40 mental health first aiders across the UK. In the security sector, we employ more than 4,000 people from the north of Scotland to Southampton and from East Anglia to South Wales. So obviously the reach is enormous. And just give you an example, on Zoom in December 19, there were 30 million users, sorry, 10 million users on Zoom. And then in August 2020, there was 300 million people using Zoom. And that's how we've tried to get to our frontline staff by utilising Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and that's really helped. So we can meet staff virtually rather than, our clients don't want us to go onto sites because we can transmit that disease from site to site and you could infect 3 or 4 different people. So it is really important to us. We've got many things that we're doing in the business. I'm glad to say that my company has heavily invested in our wellbeing programme. Our Wilson James Hub has now become a community, and we had podcasts, e-learning, communication, and as I say, it's been a community, but I agree with the other guys. And it isn't just for today. It's not just while COVID is here for the next 12 months. It's probably a life-changing thing. Thank you.
Barry, thank you very much indeed. Very, very interesting. And now for a slightly different perspective, we go from the United Kingdom over to India and Harmy, who's been on a panel before. Harmy, your insights on this issue?
Thank you, Martin, and thank you everyone for sharing your inputs. I think it's really, I'm really happy to hear that those kind of conversations are taking place, something that I've been passionate about, which is well-being. And I think I've always believed that to be able to make a change in things when things are really overwhelming, one needs to know how to pause and pivot. And the pausing that I help my clients do is really getting connected with their own internal experience of themselves. And I think that that we are seeing, of course, in the security sector is also a place of lot of stress in the pandemic. But I'd like to leave it on a positive note in terms of what I am seeing in my side of the world. I'm seeing that there has been a step up jump in terms of learning for the security sector, in terms of technologies that are being adopted in my part of the world. And it has also created, while there was a time when there was a lot of stress with the security sectors to learn new things, to manage stressed people, I think right now there's also more optimism and learning happening to adapt themselves to new technologies and to be able to do that in such a quick time. I think that's been the positive of the overall pandemic that has hit. There's also a lot of empathy towards the security sector, which is building up again from my side of the world. We're seeing them; they've done so much for all of us, and that empathy is showing, in terms of even recognizing them as frontline workers, getting them vaccination on a priority basis. So where we were maybe 6 months ago, I think things are looking a little better. Mental health and well-being will always remain an issue in high stress environments. And I cannot stress enough the need to have and build skills around having compassionate discussions and very, very affirmative actions to take care of people who are suffering.
Harmy, thank you very much indeed. Really, really interesting. Okay, so plenty of stuff to go on there. I'm going to come to my first question from Dr. Claire Lawrence, a former panelist who's one of the world's leading authorities actually on dealing with violence in the workplace and aggression at workplace. She asked this question, and I'll come to you first, Chris, and then Barry, you second. A lot of what organisations typically do is give staff employee assistance techniques, but the onus is often left to the individual to do the well-being work themselves. To what extent does the panel think there's enough consideration given to changing work processes which can cause the difficulties of mental stress? Really good, really interesting question. Chris, I'm going to come to you first and then Barry after.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Martin. And yeah, it's a subject close to my heart. And whilst I can't profess to be in the same league as Harmet, I am a coach. And in terms of what I'm trying to do in reference to that question is, again, the employee assistance program is a point of reference. It's a signpost. It's a great tool to allow people to go somewhere. But as we know, you're talking to somebody usually that you have to get permission to contact that company. The company will have usually here in the UK have agreed a certain amount of paid sessions. You will then apply to speak to that company, to that particular EAP system. Most people don't know who they're talking to, and they're naturally not too happy to do it, talking to a stranger. So what we're trying to adapt within ABM, I can't speak for my colleagues, but we're looking at two things. The mental health first aider approach is first and foremost in terms of developing our people to recognize the signs and signpost accordingly, as been covered by Barry. And the second part is about the self-care, and it's about giving those frontline teams the tools and the understanding of how to have coping mechanisms and how to change their belief system and how to then pass that on. And so for me, I think there's not enough done on that front, is the honest answer, Martin. And I think that's the way forward, how we make about positive change.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Barry, your thoughts on this this same question, please.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, it is prevalent. We do have some violence in the workplace with a couple of our contracts where we manage a high street retailer, and we saw some of the retailer staff have violence, verbal violence against them, but also we need to protect our staff as well. So they looked at security to protect their staff. So what we did, we looked at the training that we had in place, and we said, this day and age, it's not good enough. It was okay, but people's attitude in the high street is changing. People are anxious, they're stressed, they may be overworking at work, and they may have fatigue. And if you put all those into the mix, that makes for such an explosion of some individuals. So what we decided to do, we ripped apart our violence in the workplace training program, we revamped it, and we bespoke it to certain clients that we deal with. And then, of course, there's the employee helpline that we use as well. And what we saw is with the violence in the workplace, we spoke to the company that we use for our employee assistance helpline, and we spoke to the counsellors, and we told them exactly what our officers were going through. So yes, we obviously can share about our officers, but then the counsellors, the true counsellors, are on the end of that line. And some of the counsellors, in a COVID-safe manner, would come to site as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Nicholas, I'll bring you in on this, and then I'll just get a comment from Harmeet as well. I mean, Claire's point is about changing work practices. To what extent, Nicholas, do you think that is core to current thinking around the security sector? Nicholas?
I can't speak for the whole sector, but certainly within healthcare, there's been a reported increase of violence towards security officers, which probably picks up on Barry's theme that people are generally far more stressed, they're far more anxious, and they're coming, the hospital's not a great place to be to start with, but they're coming in with a further burden of stress. That equally on the security officers, they're confronting potential violence and escalated situations, but they additionally have the worry of being infected themselves. So what I can't say is that there's a single universal answer. All sorts of sites, different by companies, have adopted different approaches based on their risk assessments. And whilst risk assessments need to be specific to the site, there maybe need to be some more universal tools available to support the officers and to address the level of violence that's been displayed towards security officers.
Nicholas, thank you very much. A good question for Harmeet then, bring you in, Harmeet. I mean, we had a question in from John Felix, or really a comment in advance, and he was talking about the fact that while things are improving, picking up on what Nicholas has said, practices vary so greatly. Harmeet, I guess, is there a danger that in developing speedy responses to an emerging problem, that on this sort of topic, if you don't get it right, you could do more damage than good? And how do we know we're doing good? Or how does anyone know that what's being done is being good? Harmeet?
Absolutely. I think that, yes, there is a danger if we don't take care of the humans who are supposed to be doing the work for us. So yes, absolutely. I think over the years, we've been dehumanizing our workforce in general. And I think once we are able to bring the humanity back by having conversations which are difficult around emotions and legitimizing those conversations, finding a safe person to have that discussion within an organization, I think that's where the change is going to begin. So I agree, you know, if you are just doing this change for no, you know, just immediately without even considering the human factor, it can damage.
Yeah, okay. I mean, has that actually happened in other industries, Harmy? I mean, does it happen that you can get this wrong and have the reverse impact?
Absolutely. I think a lot of companies kind of look back and are actually still reflecting, saying what could they have done better in the last 1 year for their employees as well as their families. And they're learning from it. Maybe it came a little late for them because everybody was dealing with the issue at their end as well. So yes, there have been cases where people are looking back and seeing how people have fallen into anxiety moods. It doesn't have to be always violent, but a lot of anxiety and a lot of fatigue in general. And overall, of course, that means that the business is not doing well. So yes, if you reflect back, there have been a lot of organizations, but I have to say that some leaders at the top, I think it really begins at the top. If a leader is mindful, and I think that's your next topic, the mindfulness in leadership. If the leader is mindful, it just percolates down very quickly within the organization, and we have to begin there.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. We got a webinar in a few weeks' time on mindfulness and leadership. Barry, come to you first on this one. Another leading scholar, Matt Hopkins, who's also been a panelist, also specialises in the subject of workplace violence, and indeed has been looking at security. He says, in research I have been involved with, frontline security often talk about how better support would make them feel loyal to their employers. But then they speak of a reluctance to speak up about feeling anxious or depressed due to shame, or Barry, perhaps even concern about keeping their job in this climate. Barry, then Chris, is that a real issue in security frontline, do you think? And what's the solution?
Yeah, there is a problem there with anxiety, people thinking that they may lose their jobs, especially if you consider the furlough scheme that we have in the UK. I've got members of staff, frontline staff, that have been on furlough 3 times now, and some of them for 80 days. So they are anxious. It is an issue that we have to challenge. But I agree, it starts at the top. And our CEO, who's one of the founders of the business, it's very dear to his heart, and he's leading the charge within Wilson James to try and rectify this problem. Obviously, it's just not a light switch moment. It is here for life. What we've done is that we've opened up nearly every channel that we possibly can, and we've invested in new channels of communication within the business that we can reach frontline staff, and we want them to speak up. The employee helpline has assisted us greatly. We have seen an increase in people contacting that helpline. What's the answer? I think if I knew the answer, I'd be a millionaire or a billionaire even. It's as Nick said, there's not a one size that fits all here. It's different for different sectors that we work in. But if you are anxious, you're anxious. And it's about getting that help. And like some of the other guys on the call, Wilson James have saved lives by speaking out to our colleagues at the front line. Okay,
Chris, let me ask you about this then, because I can see where Matt's coming from with the question, Chris. It's all very well asked to sit in a thought leadership webinar and talk about the logic of opening up and understanding problems. But I might be a bit more reluctant if I thought my job was at stake, and I've got every reason to suppose it might in certain parts of frontline security. Chris?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I'm going to make a controversial comment, Martin. I was once told by a client when I was in the front line that when I presented some problems in my early management career, the client said to me, here's the advice. The advice is you leave your problems at the door when you enter this building, and you pick them up when you go home, and you take your problems back home. And 15 years ago, that may have been relevant in a very military style of way of doing things. It's certainly not the case now, and it's definitely not something that I would ever want to hear again. And I'm sure Barry, as a fellow employee, would say the same. I think the biggest challenge we have, Martin, as an industry, not just in security, but I think the biggest thing here is presenteeism is our next biggest risk. We're very focused on the COVID and the people that are sick, self-isolating, those that are at home who are anxious on furlough. But I think the next biggest thing for us also is we have the duty of care to our staff who are on furlough and have the concerns and the anxiety. And the solution from our point of view is to keep regular contact weekly with those people, our staff, letting them know what we're doing, keeping that engagement, having WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, any type of group is very important, and our teams have benefited, as has Barry's. Our leadership attend those, which is absolutely important. But I also think that if we're not careful, presenteeism in the workplace is going to be our next biggest challenge, because we will have people in fear that, you know, they've had to turn up when their mental health is in question. And rather than raise their hand and say, I need help via whichever means which that employer offers, they keep coming in, and eventually a mistake will be made and the elastic will eventually snap. And then we have a whole different set of problems.
Yeah, I mean, Harmy, this is one of these things that you spoke about leadership, and clearly that's important at the very top. Often it seems here the problem is about lower level leadership and the sort of lower levels who are directly overseeing the front line. And this has often been seen to be quite weak in some areas of the security sector. And I guess that's an area where problems may manifest themselves. I guess that's just as important as leadership at the top, isn't it?
So Martin, I think the lower level leaderships also need to be invested in. Maybe the investment is not necessarily related to coaching, but it could also be to help them train their frontline staff. And the training that they need to, I firmly believe in this, leadership is all about conversational intelligence. And even at the lower level, if we can teach them how to have conversational intelligence, to be the one-line partner who can actually listen to their frontline workers, just imparting that training with them would reduce the amount of stress that they face in the environment. And they can be the channel for their frontline workers.
Yeah, I guess, Nicholas, we haven't always been good. See, the thing is, Nicholas, what I'm going to get at here is that this issue is emerging and it's becoming a big one. And of course, many are saying we haven't yet seen the scale of the problem. It's going to hit us later as it sort of comes out over time, Nicholas. And I just wonder whether, do you feel that as a sector, as an industry, that with the bits you're familiar with, Nicholas, that organisations, the security sector is on top of this at the various levels that it needs to be? Nicholas?
I'm glad you put that this way, Martin, but in a nutshell, no. And our own embedded culture within the security organisation is probably part to blame for that. We've for decades have had an attitude of a stiff upper lip, dehumanising the security officer, leave your problems at the door, be the silent but strong person in the background. But I am seeing a change in the conversation across the industry and an acceptance that security officers are humans too. That might come as a revolutionary thought to some, but I firmly believe it. And we've spoken about the middle management levels. I think very often they're desperate to help, but they're not always certain the top level management who've put out beautiful theories or policies are entirely genuine. This is about culture change. I don't think it's going to be overnight, but I am feeling a will in the industry for that culture to start shifting. And I really hope it does, so we can get a grip on it before, as you say, the true extent of the problem comes out over time.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to come, Chris, one more final comment from you on, Chris. That's a good point Nicholas raised here, because the security sector has got a very male-dominated, almost a macho sort of culture. At least traditionally, it's been seen to be that way, you know. Again, of course, that's a tricky sort of culture to challenge, isn't it? It's been embedded, as Nicholas implies, for a while now. Chris?
Yeah, I completely agree, Martin. And as you know, and as the SIA stats that came out recently suggested, it's about 10% of the UK workforce is made up of females, which is completely under the levels we would want. And again, you know, looking at the statistics here in the UK of license holders, the two top percentages, age range of males predominantly and females is between 36 and 55 is the age range. So our biggest workforce here in the UK of security license holders is between that age. That's clearly an age of people that predominantly the latter years would have grown with that mindset of the stiff upper lip, don't share your problems, that kind of thing. And we do need to go forward with, you know, different ways to what we've been doing. We can't keep doing the same what we've been doing for the last 10 years. We need change. And in terms of the solution, there are companies out there that are offering more app-based technology where you can have an app that allows you to do mindfulness and it's personalized to you. And then if you still feel at the end of that, Martin, that you need more, you can then speak to a trained counsellor. And this is all things that can be added to an employee assistance program, which are NHS led. I won't mention the company because it would be inappropriate, but it's someone we're looking at for the reasons that it offers instant access for people to have that mental health wellbeing check-in.
Okay, I mean, Barry, two questions really, one from Gary McLean and one from Mike Cummins, also a former feminist. But Gary McLean's point is, if this is so important, shouldn't this be part of a statutory requirement, Barry? And the second point from Mike Cummins is about whether a business case for more resources in this area is really persuasive, with clients also being asked to cut back. And of course, Barry, you've got an element of your company in the in some very troubled areas, haven't you? So two questions: one, licensing; two, business case to clients, really doable. Barry.
Yeah, so I'll just come back on saying that it's not one size that fits all, but legislation hopefully does change, and a statutory requirement would benefit everybody. Especially when you're talking to clients, because sometimes we feel that security, when there's an incident in the world, security and health and safety goes to the top of the agenda. When that incident goes away, and probably for 12, 18 months, 2 years, unfortunately, security is a purchase of a commodity rather than a service. And what I mean by that in layman's terms, some people see it as a grudge purchase, and what benefit does it bring? Now, obviously, over the last 10 to 11 months, security has been right top of the agenda. So legislation would help. And if the government could put legislation in as quick as they have over the last 10 months, that would be great. With regards to the second case, interestingly, my client base are really open to our business cases around EDI and have
EDI, Barry? EDI, can you just explain to people, EDI?
Diversity and inclusion. And part of that is mental health. It's a part of our CSR policy, corporate social responsibility. It's all wrapped up into one program within our business. When we've taken it to clients, they've been really receptive towards that program, especially when you mentioned the well-being of the frontline staff. And we've got a number of programs that are part funded by Wilson James and part funded by the clients. And to be honest with you, it was a fairly easy conversation to have.
Chris, have you had those conversations and were they easy?
Alas, I didn't have the success of Wilson James and Barry, but knowing that Wilson James led the way 10 years ago on this, Martin, when I worked with them, and they had a thing known as the Staff Welfare and Development Chat. That was the first time I'd ever seen the well-being brought to the fore, where you'd sit down and have a proper conversation with your line manager and talk through issues, and that would be reflected in an overall KPI score, which was great, so the business could see. I've never seen anything like that since I left WJ, and I wish we could have the conversations with clients that Barry's having. I'd be delighted if that was the case. That said, we will keep pushing the agenda for the obvious reasons. And I think, Martin, again, if I may, we've dealt with several fatalities of late within our industry, and my frontline colleagues have dealt with that. And we're trying to adapt the change of, you've just dealt with somebody that's passed away or jumped from a car park roof, walk around the block, have a cup of tea and continue your shift. Those days cannot be, we can't ask our guys to continue that. We have a duty of care. They've experienced some trauma. We should be sending them home with the appropriate support and aftercare, explaining to the client what that means, and not forcing them and rushing them back to the next shift for completion. And that's something as an industry here in the UK we've got to get better at. And that's my controversial statement.
Well, Chris, it's controversial. It's perfectly understandable. And I mean, but the point is, Chris, this: what's the barrier to getting clients on board this? Why is it not obvious?
It's obvious, but as Barry alluded to, for some clients, it's a grudge, and security is the fifth wheel on the wagon, which I've mentioned before, Martin, about being the odd one out. And it's a case of, do we have to? It's the same with PPE. I can see some comments about PPE. And again, in the early days of COVID, we were looking at what was coming down the line. We were suggesting potential face shields and masks. And some of the clients said, oh, there's no need for that. There won't be a requirement here because so again, it's very much client driven. But as the employer, we have a duty of care, and really it sits with us to drive that change. And if employers wish to get on board and do partnerships such as Barry has alluded to, then that's a bonus for me as an industry. Okay,
very good. Harmy, I'm going to come to this a different angle, if I might. If I could just come to you with a sort of left field question in a way, and I'll come to Nicholas afterwards. It comes from Brian Sims, who's also been a panelist, who is a leading journalist, one of the leading journalists in this area. And he was very interested to know whether if there was a greater deterrence in the courts, for crimes of violence perpetrated against frontline workers, such as security. So it became a bigger issue. Do you think that would enable them to operate better? Does that go in any way to improving the well-being on the front line? I mean, or is that just too distant? Are we just attacking the wrong point here? Harmy, and then Nicholas, if I could.
Martin, I think there have been a lot of cases where things have actually gone wrong with the frontline workers. It's not like it hasn't gone wrong with the frontline workers. We've had a case recently, not just frontline workers, but with the security staff. So it's not like we'll have to wait for things to happen. I think there needs to be a complete shift in the way we look at things. The way I look at working with organizations, with a lot of other organizations, not necessarily security staff organizations, they tend to package it in a way where it's like a culture shift, where well-being is just one part of the whole game. And I still believe that that's a good start for us to, start something around well-being. So I struggle to actually look at the situation right now. Things are actually at a level where there is a lot of stress. People at the front line are being attacked, and they've had to go through a lot of things which they shouldn't have. However, I still believe, and I hope, that there is going to be a consistent action by different business leaders that can show results, and this can just start a movement in itself in my part of the world.
Interesting. So you see this as there's a bit of an impetus behind this, then, you feel?
Yes, I do. I see it in other industries for sure, and I also see that because there's a general empathy now building towards the frontline workers, it's going to create more and more momentum.
Okay, Nicholas. Okay, Harmy, thank you very much indeed. Nicholas, on this, I just want to make sure I do justice to Brian's question. It's an interesting point, Nicholas. We've tended to sort of speak today about things within the sector we can do within organisations, within companies. From your point of view, Nicholas, what about this idea that, hold on a minute, what we really got to do to take this seriously is recognise some of the cause here that's coming from outside. This thought either specifically about more deterrence for those who commit offences against security officers, or more sort of generally thinking about how we might have to look beyond the security sector to find a solution. Nicholas, your thoughts? You're in a good area for that question, really.
Yeah, and I would support in principle the inclusion of security officers in the Assaults Against Emergency Workers Act, but that does require classifying security officers as emergency workers. They have recently been temporarily designated as critical workers by the Home Office, but that is quite a transient designation, and we've got to be careful with setting things in law. Whilst it can increase the deterrent, when we're in a status of near national emergency and anxiety is running high, I don't know whether a deterrent will always act as a deterrent. In the long run, I would support the notion, but I'd also air caution that not all security officers are SIA licensed. There are many in-house security officers, including in the healthcare sector. So we've got to be very careful that we actually capture all and capture them appropriately if we are going to legislate.
Okay, very good point. Very good point. I'm pleased I answered that question. Thank you. All right, let me move on because we're running out of time and I want to go. Now, Simon Chairman, in a different way, Rajiv Martha, both mentioned a point. Barry, let me come to you first on this. If I could ask you to be brief, Barry, because I'd like to get through the panel on this one. And Rajiv's point is talking more generally about people coming back to work. I mean, not just security, but people coming back to work. Barry, how prepared is the security sector, do you think, for what might come with that, given all the built-up angsts that are going to be coming back at the same time? Chris, straight afterwards. Barry first, please.
Yeah, so we've discussed this within Wilson James as well. So with people being on furlough, not just within Wilson James, but we've got a number of our clients' employees that are on furlough as well. I don't think the sector is ready. I talked to my wide network of people that I've gained over the last 30 plus years, and they say that their companies, not just in the security world, but their companies not even talking about it. But it's high on our agenda because you've got people that are on furlough that have been off for some months, and they will have probably forgotten some of the processes and the policies that were in place. The workplace may look different. Workplace design may be still in place. We've made sure that in Wilson James, we don't police social distancing. We just encourage it. because again, people become anxious, and we don't want a backlash from that. So in a nutshell, I don't think the industry is ready, and I don't think many sectors are ready for it either.
Yeah, interesting. Chris, very quickly from you, please.
Yeah, I concur with Barry. A lot of our clients we've spoken with have asked the question, but I don't think there's a real answer, and everyone's waiting to kind of see who goes first. And then we'll do the lessons learned that we're known for in our industry. And then if someone gets it right, everyone will jump on and go, oh, great, we'll follow that model. But again, as an industry, I think we are definitely conscious that bringing people back to the workplace, traveling back into London, having been out for nearly a year, that's naturally raising anxiety. And from an employer's point of view, to our frontline teams, we have to make sure they're front and center and prepared as best they can be. And that in turn will hopefully then help our clients as and when the time is deemed that they're ready to come back to the workplace under whichever guidance is provided.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Harmeet, just a few comments from you, please, very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Harmeet. How worried should we be about this people being out of work, the workplace for a long time, suddenly returning to work? Is it likely to happen? One might think on the one hand, it was back to normal. On the other, or should we be prepared for something that's going to be a bit different here and a bit more problematic on the front line? Harmeet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to be prepared for making a gradual shift. I don't think people are really prepared to move completely the way they were in day one. So it needs to be really gradual to be able to manage them at a certain pace. I don't think the world's going to look the same the way it looked a year ago. So, the processes need to be put in place, and the people training and everything would need to look at it completely from a fresh start. It can't happen just, overnight.
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, for panelists, I'm going to ask you each just in 10 seconds, which is unfair, for your final comments on this, and particularly, what are the one key thing the security sector needs to be doing as we start to think of the new normal when dealing with mental health? Chris first.
We need to be more open, and that needs to start at the top with leaders, as we're trying to do today, leading from example, sharing those examples and putting our frontline teams front and center.
Thank you very much indeed. Nicholas?
With the leaders leading, I think we then need to empower the solution and root it in our security teams with training and awareness and acceptability of mental health issues.
Makes sense to me. Barry?
My view is that just because you have a manager or director in your job title, you don't become immune to the anxiety, stress, mental well-being. And I think it's not just about the frontline staff, it's about everybody in the workplace.
Yeah, good point, Barry. Just on that, as Harmeet said earlier, we've got a webinar in a couple of weeks' time looking at this from a leadership perspective as well. Harmeet, I'm going to leave the final comment to you, please. Just your final thoughts, please, Harmeet.
Yeah, I think as leaders, we need to ensure that we can also show our vulnerability so that we are an invitation for others to also show theirs, and to share our own examples so that people have, invitation to share there as well.
Okay, panel, thank you so much for your insights and your time. Fascinating subject, actually. Brilliant discussion. Thank you so much for the question. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. It was just, there were so many of them, and I know there was a lot of chat going on as well. Brilliant topic. Thank you very much indeed. Just a few final comments, if I might. Just to encourage you to register for the OSPA's UK OSPA's award ceremony. It's sponsored by Team Software. It's happening on the 25th of February, 3:30 in the afternoon. It's free to attend. I promise you, you will not have seen an award ceremony like this. I promise you, you'll not have seen some of the security sector like this before. So register, first come, first served. UK.theospas.com, register as soon as you can. Just let you know that entries are still open in Nigeria and South Africa, and more countries will open soon. Stand by. OSPAs are around the world now. More countries being announced soon, by the way. Just to say, we've got a survey going on. The SRI survey, what are the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on security? Can you go to perpetuityresearch.com and please give us your views, your thoughts on the role of the security sector. And thank you to all our SRI members for their sterling support, that, and our supporters. And then can I remind you that we go through all again on Thursday afternoon, where the topic is the role of the GSOC. What are the limitations and the opportunities? We're going to take a critical look at the GSOC. So once again, thank you very much indeed to my panel for their expert insights. A copy of the blog about this and this recording of this webinar will be available on the website tomorrow, so you can refer to it and look at it all over again. I very much hope to see you all on Thursday, 3:30 same time, wherever you are in the world. Until we meet again, 3:30 on Thursday, I hope. Stay safe.